Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the BBC, the Boardwall Broadcasting Company. Today, we're taking on a rather ambitious topic, and that is what makes CoE different, specifically from other MMOs. Um, it's a We'll try and get this done within our typical 45-minute time frame. We might run a little bit over, but we'll try and keep it pared down. Before we get started, obviously, I'd like to introduce our three panelists, which are Mel, Elbereth, and Noslim. And what I'll do is I want to give kind of like just a little bit of before we get into the nitty gritty of the individual differences and everything, is to give just a very brief history of what I perceive to be the stages of evolution of MMOs so that we can better understand perhaps in the broader picture as to what here could be happening with CoE and the significant difference that they're going to make basically to MMORPGs as we have known them up until now. So pretty much in the 70s and 80s, online gaming, at least in terms of kind of like having multiple players on, was pretty much limited to text-based MUDs. And, you know, weren't too many people that had that much access to the internet back then. Then in the early to mid 80s, games started cropping up on CompuServe, Genie, one of the precursors to AOL. And, you know, to put some of these things in perspective, that's when I started gaming. And these games varied in price to play. They were between $6 to $12 an hour to be logged into those games and play them. So to let that sink in a little, that would mean a gamer playing 20 hours a week, which isn't uncommon for people in our community to do. They'd be paying literally $500 to $1,000 a month to play a game. When you translate that from 1980s money into money today, that's $1,200 to $2,500 a month. And I have to confess, maybe somewhat ashamedly, that I personally hit that lower number several months. Then in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, graphically improved games came out, and we saw games starting to pop up like Ultima Online, probably, you know, what most people refer to as the granddaddy of them all. There were a few before that, but that's the one where most folks remember. You know, things like Asheron's Call, Dark Age of Camelot, World of Warcraft, etc. And generally speaking, that's kind of like, you know, being the latest kind of like stage that we're at the tail end of. It's interesting for me to note that, you know, most of these, with a little bit of overlap, most of these kind of like phases have run around about 15 to 20 years. And in fact, you know, you still have kind of like, you know, enthusiast groups playing Ultima Online, and they're still charging $15 a month to play that game. So it's not just about graphics and necessary technological developments, it's the story that comes along with the game that is so important as well. So, you know, what we think that is happening here is that, you know, Chronicles of Illyria is basically going to be defining a new genre of online interactive gaming. And Soulbound Studios refers to it as the Meow, which is the multiplayer evolving online world. You'll have to pardon the pun, but for me, this acronym sounds a little too pussy. And for this discussion, I'll refer to the genre as the Geom. Geom standing for Gigantic Evolving Online Multiplayer Environment. And in fact, you'll have to kind of like bear with me for a second backup pun on that, because I tend to think of Chronicles of Illyria as the Geom project, since it's altering the DNA of MMOs as we know it. So, you know, without further ado, let's take a look at some of the individual features that not only set CoE apart from current MMOs, but basically taken together as a whole, they're setting the stage for that whole new genre and era of MMOs, the Geom. Noslim, maybe we can hear from you first, sir.
On multiplayer systems, that's the thing that I like to think of that's going to be different than traditional MMOs with regards specifically to player-run governments and you know, with our ability in CoE to use the contract system and implicit contracts to create our own laws, and so we will, you know, we'll have a template laid out for us, along with the procedurally generated world. But from there, it's up to us and how we run those governments and how we build from there and where we go from there. And you don't see any MMOs that really allow the freedom that CoE is going to allow its player base to take this community and run with it. I don't know if anybody's got anything to add to that, but that's just one of many points. I could go on and on with others.
No, I think you're right on there. I mean, there've been kind of like quite a number of games that have kind of like scratched at it. For example, for me, EVE Online is one of them, where it's very much a player-driven economy and people form their own kind of like ways of playing the game. But there isn't anything like the explicit and implicit contract system that Chronicles of Illyria is going to be offering, and it's kind of like it's taking some of the best things from a lot of games and coming up even with new and original ones and going into them on such a depth that I haven't seen before, to be quite honest with you. In fact, I'm a skeptic by nature. And I was kind of like, they're not going to be able to handle all of this kind of thing, But once they started doing so, I'm kind of like, I'm on board now, Anybody else have any input on that part of how CoE is different?
I think you said it. The contract system and everything is just so unique, and it allows for a lot more customization and just variety in the game.
I also think that it helps players sort of, take control of the world instead of running up to an NPC and having, them do whatever task you need them to do. You run up to another player and you use the contract system to have them do that. And to me, that's just, helping flesh out a real world.
Yeah, agreed. So El, why don't you carry on and tell us the points that you think that CoE differs from the regular theme park standard cookie cutter MMO that we're seeing these days.
Yeah, and just a little bit of background about me in terms of what it is I look for in games. I have a dirty little secret, and it's that I don't actually like MMOs that much. So I'm actually kind of banking, hoping, praying that CoE is not going to be your traditional cookie cutter, theme park MMO. I'm really hoping that they are going to break the mold, and everything I see about it sort of encourages me on thinking that they're doing that. So one of the biggest things to me is skill-based combat. Basically one of the turnoffs of MMOs is that I don't know, and I'm probably gonna be trashing MMOs a bit here, but basically you just sort of feel like you're, auto attacking a character, and you're sort of sitting there watching it happen. And maybe you're hitting one, and then you hit two, and then you go back and hit one again, and you hit three. It doesn't feel like combat to me. It doesn't, I'm a real Twitch-based gamer. I enjoy games like Mountain Blade Warband and Chivalry, and to a lesser extent For Honor. I like first-person shooters as well. I want to feel like I'm actually fighting somebody when I play a game. And CoE has been very clear that they're going to include skill-based combat. So it's not just that when you fight somebody else, it's not just that you've grinded more and you have the better loot or gear on you. It's you're actually a more skilled player, which I just find absolutely amazing, and really what I would want in an MMO for the combat, at least. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to add to that point.
It will be interesting. In contrast, I normally play MMOs. You guys have seen me play first-person shooters, and it's interesting. I'm getting better, but yeah, I'm really, really intrigued to see how the combat works. Slightly nervous, but it'll be good.
What are you nervous about?
Oh God, it's just not really. I guess nervous is kind of a weird word for it, but kind of excited to see what all the kind of combat skills are actually going to be, because it sounds so different from what's out there right now.
Yeah.
Sounds like excited apprehension on your side there, Mel. Might be the way to best describe it, and I would tend to agree with that. I'm somebody that is kind of like from the other side spectrum, in as much, at least in regards to ELB, in as much that I typically have always played MMOs, and the MMOs basically, combat in them would typically, be evolved around tab targeting and who could hit their macro button the quickest and spam the other person to death with their macros. It wasn't particularly skill based. It was kind of like, keyboard based. And I've kind of like, turned around from that. In fact, you guys, I've played with all of you in PUBG. Took you guys 2 months to get me into PUBG, which is basically the first kind of like almost like first person or MOBA type setting I've ever played in. And, although I'm struggling in it, I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm enjoying, the fact that it's not about tab targeting, the fact that you have to be skilled, etc. I've got a long way to still go on my learning curve to become more skillful at it, but thoroughly enjoying it and looking forward to seeing that element of combat come into CoE. Noz, did you have anything to add into that before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a hot minute, so I've played a lot of games, beta tested a lot of games. I've had experience with a lot of different combat play styles, and for me, as long as it feels good, as long as it's fluid, as long as it feels good, I mean, obviously, skill-based combat is the cool thing right now, and it's fun. I enjoy it as long as it's not clunky. If it's painful to play, this skill-based combat you see in a lot of games, it is clunky, and it's painful. It's not fluid. It feels awkward. So this is going to be something that they have to get right. And so the latest footage that we have is over a year old. And I think they've made significant improvements on it since then, but we haven't seen much, and I hope we see more, because like I said, this is up there with crafting. It's one of the most important elements of the game, in my opinion. So I'm excited for it, but they got to do it right.
Yeah, fully agreed. So Mel, it comes around to your turn. How about what you think some of the kind of like major and distinct differences between CoE and the other theme park MMOs out there are?
I have to say, I'm really excited about, I guess, starting at the beginning. So, character creation. Normal MMOs, you pick the face you want, you pick what type body you want, and kind of go from there. And it's kind of set. The only thing you can really do is you play through is make kind of basic cosmetic changes like hair color, eye color, that kind of thing. But in contrast to UE, it's right from the get-go. So instead of just piecemeal picking how you want your character to look, you pick your family, or you pick whether you want to be a ward of the state, and then genetics play a role in how you look. And sure, I mean, there's some variation, um, character creation there, but once you get in game, it's not static. I mean, if you're a really active player running around outside, you're going to be very tan. You're probably, if you're, into fighting a lot, going to have a lot of scars. And your actual gameplay style is going to affect how you look. And I think that's going to be really, really cool to actually see that evolve, especially with the aging system. And then from there, so you've made your character, and then in a normal MMO, you'd start at level 1, and you would start in kind of the start area, and there's a set kind of quest progression to get you kind of to the level cap. CoE, you're gonna start in your family, and you're already gonna have, based on your soul and what family you picked, kind of skills accessible there. And you're not gonna be a set class either, which is, I think, really, really cool, and just kind of even more customization. You don't have to be a thief or a warrior or a healer. You can kind of, I mean, you could be a warrior who raises bees. You can really do whatever you want. So I think that's gonna be really, really cool. And I think people are really gonna enjoy the fact that it's so very, very customized. Um, After that, ooh, one more thing that I think is gonna be really interesting is, so like now, like we all play games together. We kind of know each other now through CoE, but play different games But normally when you're starting a new game, if you don't already have a guild or friends that you're playing with, you just kind of start out solo and kind of maybe find some friends or a guild along the way. But starting in that family structure, you're already going to have people in that family. That's kind of an already existing social structure and kind of built-in loyalties and all of that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're not loyal to whatever family you end up in, but that again will just make it even more interesting. So yeah, that as far as player characters goes, it's just going to be a whole lot more customization, a whole lot of options and opportunities, and quests especially with that contract system we talked about earlier. You're not just gonna, grind the exact same quest, the exact same path, straight till level 80, and then stop and wait for an expansion. You can, because of the contract system, you're essentially building your own storyline, and it's continuous. You don't have to wait for an expansion to come out to get new content. It's continuously evolving, like your character, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely so. I think kind of like piggybacking on some of the points that you made there is, for me, what's amazing is kind of like is the crafting. It's the fact that we're not going to cap out at, at 100 and that's it. You're now a legendary blacksmith or a legendary tailor or hunter or, farmer or whatever the case might be. For me, this fact that only 1% of the players at any given time are going to be legendary. And, when they reach that, they're going to die. And when they die, some of that skill is going to get lost. There will be obviously some carryover, but as they're kind of like getting back up to legendary, somebody else will be at that, or there'll be grandmaster, etc. So it's not like you can ever kind of like max out your skills. It's a dynamic, ongoing, kind of like ever evolving process, which I didn't know quite what to make of it the first time I read about it. It was like, what do you mean I can't cap out my characters? I play a lot of time on games, and this is what I enjoy, and I like having all my 20 alts, one for the tailor, one for the smith, one for this, one for that. And it's like only the most dedicated are going to be up there. I mean, legendary is actually going to mean legendary. It's going to mean that it's going to be rare. It's going to mean that it was truly earned and that it was deserved, instead of, you might have hit a macro and kind of like done a bunch of crafting or whatever, or chopping a tree AFK or something like that. Noz, Elb, what are your inputs on that?
I like the idea that your appearance can change over time, because I like to, like a fine wine, I think I get prettier as time goes on. So maybe there's hope in game too. I don't know. But the thing that excites me most about the unique player mechanics is the story arcs and the custom story arcs for each character, and how those are going to bounce off of not only your character but other characters, and the decisions you make and the things that you do. I think that's a very, very neat aspect that's not talked about very much, but it's going to be very ingrained in everything that we do in game. So
awesome. Elb?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I just think that all those components are really going to help make the world seem alive. It's not going to be your standard, like every time you log in, things are going to be different. Things will have changed. The world will have moved on without you. And I just think that's fantastic and just a really neat aspect of it. And also, I mean, one thing I like about crafting is that's also going to be skill based. So, maybe, maybe you just made an absolutely legendary sword, but maybe the next one you make, you'll cut it a little better. You'll do this a little bit better. You'll do a better job of, grinding it down or whatever. It's even better than the last one you made. So there's always something to be working on in skill terms as well.
Awesome. So I've got a couple of things that I want to talk about and add my kind of like opinions into the pot of why I think it's different. I'll try and keep them brief. I know I do ramble at times, and my excitement and passion for the game will kind of like get me going. But I'll keep an eye on the little clock down here.
Hey, Dave, Dee, can we mention the contest so that the viewers can get involved in that too?
Absolutely. I don't know if Katie has already put it up or not, but there is the contest going on today, which basically Katie will put up a little phrase. I believe that the phrase for this week is the Kippick Carol Singers are off tune. The Kippick Carol Singers are off tune. And basically what we're looking for is the most creative and humorous take on that, probably in 50 words or less. And we shall announce the winner at the end of the contest. And they will have a choice of either getting 100 EP or a choice of either a guild, a villager, or a kingdom token. So we've expanded kind of like the choices at the moment with that free kingdom contest going on. Cool. Thank you for reminding me on that, Noz. So coming back to CoE and the differences between the other MMOs, basically there are two things that I wanted to touch on. And I think the first one that I want to look at is just the creature and NPC artificial intelligence, normally referred to as AI. And if we look at that, you know, up until now, NPCs in MMOs have, for the most part, just been relatively bland and blah. And, you know, they've kind of like, you know, had this kind of like, they're like mindless fluff added to kind of like populate a town, or to, you know, be a quest giver or a merchant where you can get rid of the 300 kind of like rat traps that you just crafted or something, or they're trainers where you just go and cash in your experience or respec or something like that. You know, or they might be actual characters in a quest line, and they're very kind of like very linearly scripted, and they don't add much. And if you kill them, you know, they'll respawn 5 minutes later for the next person to run on them. You know, in either case, these NPCs, they're very static. You know where to go and find them. You know where the quest giver is. You know where the trainer is at, etc. And they stand there, rain or shine. You know, day and night, month in, year in, and etc. And you know, in CoE, it's a completely different experience. Is what you've got is, you know, just like player characters, the NPC characters, they're born. They will have their kind of like their skill sets with them. They'll grow. They also will change appearance. I mean, who's ever heard of a game where the NPCs are actually evolving as well? You know, they're going to acquire and improve upon their particular skill sets, and they're going to interact in many ways. You know, they're going to do this crafting, trading, and fighting, and they're going to move around the town kind of like almost in an unpredictable manner for us that are used to kind of like normal NPCs, because they're going to be doing stuff that's going to kind of like be improving, you know, their profession and stuff. And, you know, they might not even stay in the same town. If there's a town closer by that's got better taxes or a lower crime rate, or, you know, has more work for offer, they're going to migrate to the next town. I mean, you know, it's so dynamic that it's kind of boggling. You know, the other thing that you see in the typical MMOs is the NPCs don't like really react with you. You know, they, you know, for the most part, again, they're just standing. You go up there, you click on them, you get your quest, or you get 5 or 6 different options to talk to them, and that's about it. Whereas, you know, in CoE, they're kind of like, I'll briefly get into kind of like, you know, some of the scripting that's going to be going on with them, so that you can just understand the depth that this goes into. You know, first of all, the NPCs in CoE are going to they're going to subscribe in part to what is commonly known as the Big 5 personality traits. And that is openness to experience. And so at one end of the scale, they can either be inventive or curious. And on the other end of the scale, they might just be very consistent and kind of like very cautious about, you know, different situations. The other thing of the Big 5 is conscientiousness. And this basically means, you know, are they efficient? are they very, very organized? Versus on the other end of the scale, are they just lazy bastards and, you know, just lolling around and kind of like careless and not doing much? Extroversion is handled with them. Again, are they energetic, or are they kind of social and gather around people in the marketplace? Or are they solitary and kind of like, you know, live more on the outskirts and are reserved and shy and won't chat with you much? Agreeableness will kind of determine, you know, how much, again, they interact with you, whether they're compassionate, etc., or whether, again, you know, whether trying to talk to them might be just a very, very challenging experience. And then neuroticism, where basically, you know, you can have one that's like hypersensitive and very nervous, and another one might be very secure and confident. And then when you look at all the variabilities of that on those 5 different scales, how unique almost each NPC will become, it's to me, it's boggling. It's amazing. And, you know, as if that wasn't enough to be excited about, they're also going to program into these NPCs. They're basically, it's known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that, again, trying to be very brief on that, basically the NPCs are going to look after their own needs first. They're not just going to be standing on the corner waiting for you to walk up to them. They're going to be also making sure they've got enough to eat, that they've got enough to drink, that they've got shelter, that they've got warmth, etc. After that, they're going to be looking after their safety. And then, you know, again, something unheard of in an MMO before, they're going to start looking at their physiological and self-fulfillment needs. And what that starts moving into is they're going to start getting perhaps ambitious. They might be seeking an office or something like that. They're going to start spreading gossip. They're going to start kind of, you know, maybe they belong to a religion and they want to, you know, spread that religion, etc. I mean, it's just amazing, you know. And then I'm looking at the time, we're still okay. So I'll kind of like transition into animals. I mean, when you look at animals in most MMOs, you know where they're going to spawn. You know that, hey, if I need X amount of kind of like light leather, I know where the 4 rabbits spawn, and they spawn every 2 hours there, and hopefully I get there before somebody kills them. And if I don't, you know, I got to sit around or do something else for the next 2 hours until those 4 rabbits respawn again. Here in CoE, animals, and, you know, to a probably a similar extent, plants as well, they're such an integral part of the kind of like the ecosystem of each biome that they're going to be in. They're going to procreate. They're going to age as well. I mean, you know, mounts are going to die. Your cattle's going to die. You know, they're going to need tending. They also will need to sleep, you know, gather their food, whatever the case might be, hunt, guard, migrate, you know, breed, obviously. You know, they're going to be part of the regular kind of like ecosystem in terms of breeding rather than respawning. And, you know, how about aggro range? You know, in a typical MMO, I'm used to, wow, if I want to go kill those rabbits, I know exactly where the aggro range is. I can walk up to it right in front of it with my bow and arrow drawn. And as long as I know that, oh, I'm just out of its aggro range, I can kill it, right? And that's it, it's done. Whereas in CoE, they have this prey and predator system where basically the prey animals are going to be very, very sensitive, just like in real life. If they hear you walking through the forest and kicking up leaves and stuff like that, they're gone. You won't even see them unless you're skilled at hunting. Predator animals, depends on the situation. They're going to be able to see, wow, it's just D walking by himself. We're going to jump him. You know, there'll be enough canis rabbits to take you down and rip you apart. And you're going to have to be careful that, you know, the hunted doesn't become, you know, the prey, etc. So I'm going to shut up now. You know, I have a couple of other things to go on, but it's time for you guys to weigh in a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely refreshing, D. That you know, you know, in every other game, the NPCs, like you said, and the animals, they're not a part of a living, breathing world. They're fluff. You know, like you said, they're decorations. Yeah, they move around a little bit. They do a couple of little silly things, but I mean they're just decorations. They're not intelligent in any way whatsoever. They're just quest givers or leather givers, like you said. So I absolutely appreciate the approach that CoE is taking, in that they're giving them many, not just more options, but many more options, and as close to real life as possible with regards to how they behave to the environment that's presented to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Elb?
What boggles my mind about is just sort of the interaction between NPCs and animals. Like, you want a city of 1,000 NPCs because you think that would be awesome. Good luck feeding that many NPCs. I mean, the amount of hunters and farmers you'd need to ensure that none of them go starving, it just boggles the mind to me.
Mel, how about yourself? Do you have any input on it?
I do. Honestly, I'm really kind of excited the fact that animals and all that and the lack of respawn, because you actually have to be careful with your resources, which I find really cool. I mean, I personally, my county, I plan on, if anything becomes endangered, or I'm planning on having kind of like a wildlife conservation area in my county if necessary. Um, so I think that is probably, I mean, it to have consequences to your actions in a game, like real cause and effect kind of things, I think is really.
Those limited resources you mentioned, that those are going to come into play when we're building our custom player built settlements as well. In most other games, we have player housing, but it's pre-generated for us, or in the rare ones where we are allowed to build, we have a plot, between X, Y, and Z that we're only allowed to build in. And even in those cases, sometimes you have to build one of 3 different types of houses. You can't tear down a wall and build something else. Whereas in CoE, the world is at your fingertips, and you can build anywhere you want to build. Now there's going to be somebody that rules that land, and you're going to have to work with them to, get the rights to do what you want to do on that land. But there's going to be mechanics in place where you can go and build a house and not even ever have to talk to anybody. And if they don't come out and say, hey, you're building on the king's land, there's going to be mechanics in place where you can do certain things within the game to say, hey, I've been living here for such and such so long, now this is my property. Well, absolutely, you're right. You've been here long enough, it's yours. And that's like the old Homesteaders Act. So we'll have player defined ownership rights and access to housing, and the other games, you have doors that can either be opened or locked or can't be open. There's no in between. Whereas in CoE, you'll have locked doors and locked chests, but you'll be able to pick those locks. Anybody can come along and pick them, and you might lose a key and you can pick your own lock, and that wouldn't be a crime. But if somebody else did, I mean, it's just the thought process that they put into all these different mechanics, for not only our own settlements and our governments and the things that we're going to build to shape our world. They put so much thought into it, whereas everybody else just puts a couple decorations on each bullet, so.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, to me, it's, just piggybacking again on a couple of your points there, Noslin. For me, the architecture tool, when they said, oh, there's going to be an architecture tool, I was like hyper excited. It's like, wow, we'll be able to build kind of like, our own buildings, instead of kind of like you can build a 3-bedroom 2-story house here, or this plot will only build like a 1-bedroom wooden shack kind of thing, and you gather materials and boom, click a button and it's there, it magically appears. The architecture tool, as I'm understanding it, for CoE, is it's not going to be just for architecture, guys. It's not just going to be about building buildings. You'll basically, anything that you can craft or create, kind of like that requires a number of different modules and components, you'll be able to put together using the architecture tool. For example, the architecture tool is going to be used to design ships. It's going to be an integral part of shipbuilding and ship design. Maybe where you place the cabins. I don't know, here I'm starting to speculate a little bit, but the shape of the hull that might make it either faster or perhaps a bit slower, but can carry more cargo. Siege weapons, you're going to be able to design using the architecture tool. I mean, to me, again, just jumping and deep diving a little bit further, does this mean, that if we get the knowledge as maybe tinkers of pulleys, ropes, gears, cogs, those kind of things, that we can actually improve upon and make better siege weapons and come up with new siege weapons kind of thing? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I, for one, am super excited about the architecture tool. Not strictly for siege weapons, but just because I really want to see how they're going to do it. Actually, because I make 3D art and everything, I just the idea of being able to create things for the game kind of myself from my own ideas and designs, I think is just really, really exciting. So I can't wait for that to come out personally.
What I think is kind of interesting about the architecture tool is just how much variety it will lend to buildings in a city, in a town, or whatever. Just each person's going to want to have their own personal shape to their building, or aesthetic to it. And will there be neighborhood committees that decide which designs are too much of an eyesore to and we got to tear that building down?
No HOAs, please. Yeah. No freaking HOAs.
But it's a possibility. Seriously speaking, it's a possibility. I mean, you don't want some ugly building next to your beautiful palace. So,
I mean, literally, the possibilities are limitless. People are talking about building billboards and for advertisement as you're going into the town. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Once you allow one, then it's a complete eyesore, and there's freaking thousands of billboards all over the King's Road. I don't know. Is it even going to be a thing? Who knows? But they seem to be giving us a lot of freedom with these tools, such as the architecture tool, to build a lot of these things to our heart's content. And, as the game's starting, there's going to be a lot of pre-made houses. There's going to be houses that you can purchase on the EP store. But I think over time, as the game develops after launch, those are going to be highly customized very much. And it won't be long until you go into a city and it will be a very, very unique city with its own feel, with its own style, with its own architecture and how it has evolved from where it originally started at launch. And that's going to be pretty awesome to see.
I mean, there's going to be nostalgia attached to play. Like, oh, this place isn't what it used to be. I mean, it's changed so much since I was, in my last life or whatever.
Yeah, back when I was a kid.
Exactly.
Back in the day.
So talking about freedom and everything like that, how about the research and development? Because research and development, most of us experienced in other games, it's very linear. You got to unlock how to craft a wooden sword before you can go on to crafting a basic little long sword, and maybe you only make it out of iron when you first start, and then when you reach a certain level you can get to 60, and that technology tree is kind of like it's set in place. As I say, it's one plank, for want of a better word, and you start at one end of that line on the plank and you work your way up to the other end, and then you're done. For CoE, it's more like, oh boy, how best to phrase it? It's more like it's like a ginormous tree, and I mean huge, like freaking miles wide kind of thing. And we all start off with our research and development at the base of the trunk. And as we explore, we make our ways up that trunk and everything like that. And there are different branches we can go down, whether that's shipbuilding, whether it's agricultural tools, whether it's alchemy, architecture itself, or, sword crafting, etc. And what Soulbound Studios have basically said, or at least how I'm understanding it, is there is no end to it. It's basically, if they see that a whole bunch of us are pushing on shipbuilding, that they will kind of like, there'll be a few steps ahead of us, so you kind of like, you don't run out, but that they will then add more items to be kind of like discovered and found out in that area, and we won't know. They'll be put in. There won't be like some big announcement. Oh, you can now research 3-masted ships, kind of thing. This is stuff that we have to find out through trial and error. This is something that our researchers, regardless of which area they're going to be researching in, they're going to have to keep researching and refining, or else they might not discover it, kind of thing. And they don't even know necessarily what they're trying to research. I mean, to me, it's amazing. How about you guys' input on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, because we don't know where it's going to lead us. But what also is intriguing about that is, it's not going to be as painful a process as we're accustomed to in other MMOs, where you go out and you gather resources, and then you craft something with those resources, and then those resources are just gone. Maybe you can melt the sword back down and get a little bit of metal from it, but that's, you're not going to get any of the other raw resources that went into making it. But in CoE, they're going to literally allow you to break it back down in stages, all the way down to the raw resources if need be. And so you craft something, you don't like the way it turns out, you break it down and you do it again. You keep learning, you keep working on it.
Yeah. We're kind of like, we're already just past our 45-minute mark, and there's still so much more to chat about, but we'll kind of like, we'll kind of like have to start truncating it here. But I mean, other things that we're to look at is just something as simple as inventory management. I remember in some games running around and I got 20 trebuchets in my backpack, right? These are freaking 30, 40-foot tall structures, for knocking down. Oh, they set one on fire, that's another. Let me pull another one out of my pocket. This isn't going to be happening. It's going to be this complex on the CoE level that if you want to be even a prospector and you want to carry a shovel and you want to carry a pick, and the shovel's 4 foot long and the pick's 3 foot long, guess what? You're not going to be able to stuff them in your backpack that's only 2 feet high. You're going to have a tailor or, yourself attach either loops or ropes or tie downs or something onto your backpack just so that you can carry them around. A Broodveer is obviously going to be able to carry things that are far larger and heavier, for example, than a Kipik can. All of this stuff is just, you're going out on an adventure. Are you going to make sure that you've got enough food and water? Or are you going to be carrying your armor and you kind of like your weapons? These are decisions that have to be made, and these decisions will have consequences that literally might mean life or death for you. What do you guys think about that?
Dude, that sort of goes into one thing that I wanted to talk about, which is how items in the game, legendary means something different in Chronicles of Valyria than it does in a typical MMO. Like, for example, if you're going through the desert and you have a legendary raincoat, it's not going to do crap for you. You need the right gear. You're better off with, a super crappy sunshade or, sun hat or whatever than you are with the best raincoat ever invented or the best armor ever invented. It's so situational based on where you are and what's happening and what you actually need at the moment. And I just find that so awesome. And, so you're not always running around in your armor, because that can get you killed if you're in the wrong situation. And it's going to give such variety to player appearances as well. People are going to dress for the climate they're in. Armor is going to change based on the climate. equipment is going to change based on the climate, the region that you're in, the biome that you're in. And it's just amazing.
Well, yeah, and to kind of like expand on that even a little bit further, how about just how inventory is kind of like handled also? I mean, if you made 300 widgets, whatever, while you were crafting to bump up, basically, if they weren't worth running across town to turn into the merchant, you just pulled them out of your backpack and they were gone. Maybe they fell to the ground and 60 seconds later they're gone.
Exactly.
Here, whatever you drop, it's going to stay there. You made it.
Yeah.
It's there. It's going to stay there. You go back to your scenarios with the town you were giving, when we were talking about the architecture tool.
You need trash pickup.
Yeah, are we going to have, people running around with waste management carts and stuff? Or are they going to be slums full of trash?
And think of after a battle, cleaning up after a battle is such a mess. You have bodies everywhere. You have bits of people. You have armor. You have weapons. You have all, everything that you bring to a fight is going to be laying around. And is it just going to sit there on a road, or are you going to send people in to go through and pick out at least the useful stuff?
Well, or is it going to be like real life where, sometimes you see in the movies the battle scenes in the aftermath with all the kind of like beggars coming around and scavenging gear and everything like that,
I'm kind of disappointed that Mel's not going to be wearing metal lingerie everywhere she goes in the entire game, to dinner, to balls, to the town square, you know what I'm saying? Just wear that same metal lingerie in everything you do. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this game, I can't even escape sunburn in a game now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn it.
So let's start wrapping it up, folks. I mean, I think we could, carry on for at least easily another hour, but, for the, keeping the fact that our viewers kind of like, are used to around about our 45-minute streams. The contest, who is the winner of the contest? Who is going to announce that? Elb? Is that going to be you or Mel?
Yes, it is. And let's see. All right. So the winning contestant has said right before the performance, they made a stop at the booth with sweet warm mead and maybe just had one or two mugs too much. At least the audience had a good laugh. That was at least until the Kippick Singers started with more inappropriate songs. And our winner is Happy Heretic 87.
Excellent. Happy Heretic. If you can message me either in Discord or on the CoE forums, I'm Deletherus on both of those. We will let me know what prize you want. If you want the token, I'll be able to send and gift the token directly to you in game. If it's the EP, I will PayPal you the $10 since we can't gift EP at the moment, and you will have that promptly. Thank you, everybody, for showing up and participating. Hopefully you had a couple of laughs with us and learned a little bit more about the game, and we look forward to seeing you in our next broadcast. Take care, everybody.